Taxi!
Where to, mate?
Hello, mate. 55 Tufton Street, please.
55 Tufton Street, SW1. Yep, I know it well. Hop in, sir. This is A Nation of Taxpayers, a weekly podcast from the Taxpayers Alliance.
On this episode of A Nation of Taxpayers with me, Duncan Barks, I'm joined by Elliot Keck, Head of Campaigns. Hello once again, Elliot.
Good morning, Duncan.
And Robert Kilgour. And there's a massive list here, Robert, so please feel free to tell me if I'm missing anything out. But business leader, entrepreneur, investor, property developer, philanthropist, chief executive of Dow Investments, PLC. Have I missed anything?
No. That's why I'm bald. I've lost all my hair through being an entrepreneur for probably 45 years.
Yeah.
And so that's the hair loss is put down to the stresses and strains and roller coaster life of an entrepreneur.
Well, listen, it's great to have you as this week's guest, so thank you for joining us on A Nation
Pleasure.
of Taxpayers. Many things that Elliot and I are keen to chew over with you, and I'm going to focus a little bit later on social care and the care sector. But I think to begin with, just a rounded conversation about the state of UK business and your assessment of the impact of Rachel Reeves's budget.
Well, I just don't see where growth is going to come from. Particularly, all of my business career, I've been in the SME sector, which should be the engine of growth for the UK economy. And I just don't see with the measures that were brought in. I mean, she kind of has kicked business in the teeth with the budget and then said, I'm not going to do any more. That's it. And I want to work with you and have a partnership to create growth and whatever when she's kicked us in the teeth. I mean, businesses that I know, including there's one that I know that is my friend of over 50 years, is fifth generation in that business. They turn over 300 million a year UK-wide. And he's just handed over to his two sons, the sixth generation. And they normally sort of plan and invest about literally two generations looking into the future. They're now wondering whether they're certainly retrenching.
Yeah.
And they're considering selling to an overseas buyer and creating a family office to make the incentive for people, not just businesses like that, but incentive for a 40-year-old who spent 20 years building up a business is looking at doing it for the next 20 years and handing over to some of his children that say are just starting in the business. Where is the incentive for him to build a new factory, open more shops or expand? There's no incentive to do that. They almost have to take the money they had set aside for growth and put that aside for inheritance tax for his children to pay. It is just so counterproductive, and it is it's a real kick in the teeth for business, the budget, and it's also the unexpected. That's what unbudgeted, unexpected cost that business, and I know some that are making more. Well, in fact, I'm doing that as well, looking at how we can use AI more.
Yeah.
And mainly in support roles to cut back on staff. So more use of AI, but also looking at retrenching and cutting back, because what is the point of taking risk and expanding when at every turn you're being kicked in the teeth?
It's something we talk about a lot on this podcast since the budget, and obviously just to recap for listeners, we have the increase in the minimum wage, we have the increase in employers' NI contributions. Aside from the budget, we also have the employment rights bill as well. So in some ways it's a double whammy, triple whammy actually.
But on the employer's national insurance, I hate when people talk about a 1.2% increase.
It's also the threshold, isn't it?
Because I'll come to that, but the 1.2% increase It's not a 1.2%
1.2
increase.
percentage points.
It's actually about a 9% increase.
That's it. Yeah.
Because 13.8 to 15 so it's about a 9% increase. But the killer for 3 sectors, particularly retail, hospitality and care, is the lowering of the threshold from 9,100 to 5,000.
Yeah.
And that's going to cost, we'll come to social care later, but the figure, a company like Renaissance Care, it's going to cost us 900,000 a year from April this year. And that's not a one-off charge, that's every year.
Yeah.
It's a jobs tax. And in fact, Rachel Reeves is quoted a few years ago.
In 2023, I think it was, or 2022.
Not that long ago, you're talking about a couple of years ago, quoted as referring to employers' national insurance as a jobs tax. And that's going to cost us £900,000 a year. Unexpected, unbudgeted for, and we're looking at how the hell in a low-margin business, a low-margin sector, I mean, just recovering from COVID and the energy crisis, most of the care home sector is running on fumes anyway, post-energy crisis and COVID. And to get this, I didn't expect the Conservative, the incoming Labour government to make... I expected them to set up a Royal Commission and kick it down the road a bit, which they have done. So I didn't expect them to come riding to social care's rescue. But I certainly didn't expect
them to make it worse.
Them to make it worse, where some councils in England are increasing their fees to the sector by about 1.5–2% from this April. And yet the added cost of these measures that you talked about is 10–11%.
Well, what's your take on this? Is it naivety? Is it ideology? And did they not think this through? What is
I'm trying to be... generous. I'm a Scottish rugby supporter. And I was at Twickenham, actually sitting right in the corner where Finn Russell took that last-minute kick. It was literally about the distance between you and I. I was away from
about 2 meters for those that can't. See us.
But so I would like to think, being generous and being optimistic, as a Scottish rugby fan, I suppose, is that it's ignorance. Yeah. And I engage. I meet regularly with SNP MPs and MSPs, with Labour MSPs and MPs, and Lib Dem. And in fact, we're speaking to Angus MacDonald, who's a Scottish Lib Dem MP, yesterday about this. I will meet and talk to legislators of any party. I mean, there's no guarantee, but my hope and view is that if they know a little bit more about the issues, it might, maybe I'm naive, it might lead to them making better decisions. But I just feel they do not understand business at all. Well, I mean, you look at their CVs, and there is no business experience in the government. Now, if you don't have the same as in business, if something comes up and you don't have within your organisation the expertise to deal with that, you get someone in. And I just don't see, unless I've missed it, I don't see them saying, because I look at my business and say, well, where are the risks? Where are we short on skills and experience? Well, we need to get somebody to cover that, whether it's a non-exec or a consultant or taking somebody on full-time to plug that hole. But they just haven't. But the other thing about Labour is it seems they didn't have a plan.
No.
And I wasn't a fan of Gordon Brown's when he was Chancellor or Prime Minister, but I've become a huge fan of his in the last since. I mean, he's kind of don't know if you'll like me to say, sort of Jimmy Carter of the UK.
Yeah, he's improved with age, improved with time.
He has. I read his autobiography a couple of years ago, and it changed my perception of him, because he's not my kind of. He's certainly not my politics, but some of the stuff that he was now saying, I thought I could warm to this.
Yeah, I mean, the fact we were both from Kirkcaldy and we both suffer from the same disease. We're Wraith Rovers Football Club supporters, but. He is a community-minded person. He's at his happiest when he's helping communities struggle through difficulties and things. That's what gets him going. He was 74 the other week, and I saw him recently and to catch up, and he's looking well, looking fit, looking well. It's great to see, and he's grinning from ear to ear because he's doing so much good in the community. It's so good to see that. That's what floats his boat, and it's great to see. Plus his wife Sarah is superb, and they're just an amazing couple. It's 1 and 1 makes 3, and they're just. So and even Gordon, when I asked him, when you came in 97, did you have a plan? And his answer to me was, how long have you got? I mean, he had a plan for scenario A, B, C, D, E on absolutely everything, because he said to me, look, I'm not, telling secrets out of school, he said, but you have no time.
Yeah.
Once you're in,
you're constantly reacting to events. Yeah,
you have no time. And then you have no time. You have to have fully developed plans with backup plan B, C, D, and E for everything, so that you grab that folder and say, right, what is... we've got 5 minutes here. What was our plan? Oh, well, that won't work now. So what was C?
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly reaching for plan B at the moment. And when this podcast is released, I believe it'll be exactly a month until the spring statement. Looking at the spring statement, and with the knowledge that they don't have a huge amount of fiscal headroom, and with your experience as an entrepreneur, are there any easy wins that the government could get in terms of policy changes, tax changes, or regulation that wouldn't cost massive amounts of money for the Treasury, but would make lives of people like you easier?
It's how they get across to us in business, to entrepreneurs and business people, that it's not public sector good, private sector bad, full stop, which is the view that myself and a lot of my fellow entrepreneurs and business people have. They're just not, their eyes glaze over, as far as when it's business. And they seem to set up, I think, is it one review or commission a week?
I think, yeah.
I mean, and actually, I talked to Gordon about it. He said, well, there's your answer. That shows there is no plan.
Yeah.
Because, there's an issue, there's a problem. Let's set up a review, or let's set up a quango to look at this. I mean, they don't. They had a 2-word plan, 2 different words: change, growth, without any connectivity to that.
Yeah.
That was it. And yes, events, dear boy, events. Was that Macmillan? Was it?
I think it was.
Yeah. I mean, so you're quite to try and answer your question. Yeah, they need to. There is no trust, because I know a lot of business people. I was approached and asked if I would, about 6 months before the election, if I would switch my support. And I know a lot of my business friends did believe what Reeves and Stammer said to them. And although I have a lot of time for Anna Sarwar in Scotland, actually, he's a decent guy and very capable. He's having difficulties because he's
dealing with the problems from England.
Yeah. So his chances, frankly, of becoming First Minister next May are dead in the water because of what's been going on down here in London. So I think that the never mind what I think, I've spoken to a lot of my friends who did publicly switch and say the supported Labour, definitely have buyer's remorse.
Yeah.
And there is no trust there. And when you're investing in, we're mentioning betting the farm or betting the house on expanding and growing your business, why? The question has to be, why would anybody do that with the amateurs that are in charge at the moment?
When you talk to your friends, and you mentioned the buyer's remorse, and obviously you made it clear that you didn't, if you like, switch sides ahead of the election or on the countdown to the election. But I mean, I was talking to someone last night who said, look, we knew Labour were going to get in. We knew it was going to be bad, but we didn't think it was going to be this bad. Do you share that view?
Yeah. And yeah, the 22 billion black hole, that most of the 22 billion black hole, in inverted commas, was caused by inflation busting public sector pay rises that were given by the incoming Labour government. I think the actual black hole, if you want to call it that, was about 9.5 billion.
Yeah, that's what the
it?
OBR said. That was genuinely unaccounted for. Although, again, a lot of that probably would have been whittled down by just the normal day-to-day.
I thought they had to also post the budget. I thought they had to issue an impact assessment on tax changes. Mm-hmm. And yet I haven't seen an impact assessment on the employer's national insurance.
No, I've not seen anything, have you?
No, I mean, well, we're seeing the impact now, I'm afraid.
I was told at the time, don't have to produce one now at budget time because these changes are not, employers' national insurance changes are not coming in till April.
Yeah.
And we'll produce one in the spring. So unless they're going to produce one by the March, March of 26, is it?
Yeah.
That's
the spring statement.
Yeah, so it's by then, isn't it?
I mean, it's a trust. Trust has gone, and once... We all know that, whether we're dealing with personal relationships or business relationships, once trust is gone, and it's likely gone for good. So I don't see how they could get it back.
Well, exactly. I was going to say, I mean, how would they get it back? Because
if they can't, then where is growth going to? We're back to this. Yeah. Every single person in business is looking at cutting, retrenching, saving. They're not looking at expanding and doing deals and growing their business.
Yeah.
And you multiply that, by right across the country, then where is the growth going to come from? I worry that the Labour government will say, if business are not going to enter into a genuine partnership with us to grow the economy, then we'll just have to do it as public sector growth because they know how to do that. And we all know, sadly, those of us you're too young, but some of us are older. We've seen it. Yeah. We've been there and we've seen it.
Got the scars.
And we've got the hair loss. We've certainly got the hair loss for that. But so I really don't see. But that's what some of my Labour friends have said to me. Well, if you guys won't enter into a true partner, I said, how can you sort of give somebody a good kicking and then say, oh, by the way, I'd like to work with you going, in an equal partnership.
It wouldn't be a true partnership, would it?
No,
exactly.
No.
Now, let's carry on talking about the social care side of things because
it's good timing for it.
It's very good timing, and just to kind of move this chat on a little bit, a survey of 1,180 care providers that was carried out by the Care Provider Alliance found that 22% of those who responded were planning to close their business, 73% will have to refuse new referrals from local authorities or the NHS, 57% plan to hand back some contracts, and 64% feared having to make staff redundant. Now, I think we could have almost predicted those results, but that creates a massive, massive problem for the care sector. You mentioned Renaissance Care that you take care of in Scotland with thousands of employees. Just give us a sense of the real life impact.
Yeah, well, we look after just under 900 vulnerable elderly across 19 care homes throughout Scotland, and have about 1,500 part and full-time staff. And the real, I could actually have accepted the sort of 9% increase from 13.8 to 15% as well. We've all got to chip in and contribute to this. The real killer blow, certainly for us, Renaissance Care, and for care homes in Scotland, is the reduction in the threshold from 9,100 to 5,000, because like hospitality and like retail, there's predominantly a lot of part-time staff, and that means that from April that's where, if you like, the majority of the £900,000 a year extra costs that we're faced with from April is that, which is 50% of our profit that we made last year, by the way.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a 50% extra tax every year going forward on your business. But what people that up until this April were paying. We were paying zero employers' national insurance on. We're paying lots of other taxes to government on our employees and other things, and VAT and whatever. But they're going to go from zero straight to 15% overnight. Yeah. Now, what percentage increase is that, going from 0 to 15%?
Infinity, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so that is the killer blow, and care home, and we expect that. I don't expect Rachel Reeves to the government, especially with defence issues that we've all been hearing about of late, that they're not going to do a U-turn. I did try and give them a sort of gentler way out by delaying some of the employers' national insurance increases for social care by another year to sort of smooth out the curve a bit, because that would lead to less care homes closing and less bed blocking. So I did do a one-pager for them through a back channel to Stephen Kinnock and West Reading, but surprise, surprise, I've had no response. And whether I expected a response, I don't know. But the impact of these increases is going to. I don't expect any help from any backtracking from Reeves. I also don't expect government or local authorities to compensate care homes for the extra employers' national insurance. And there's some of these examples I mentioned at the beginning where councils in England saying, we're short of money, 1.5%, 2% increase, when care homes have had 10, 11% increase because of these changes. And local authorities, I mean, government will say, Reeves and central government will say, we've given social care 3 billion or 800 million, there's various figures throwing around depending how you categorise it. But that's not true. They're out and out lies, because what they're doing is they're giving that to local authorities. Yeah. And local authorities, and that also, by the way, is for social care and children's services. So it includes, when they talk about social care,
children's services is also a huge budget. And
so it's not just for social care. When they give money to social care, it's and children's services. But also they give it to local authorities who have lots of leaky buckets all over the place. And by the time that happened during COVID, and I used to fall out with Rishi when he was Chancellor during COVID about you're giving all this, saying to me, you're giving all this money to social care, but it's not getting to the front line. And so that is why people like me are, you mentioned this figure, in Scotland it's higher. There's 50% of care home operators in Scotland are considering closing one or more services. And we're certainly looking at that at Renaissance, because we have to keep the lights on and we have to keep going.
And with energy costs going up, keeping the lights on is getting harder.
No, so I mean, it's huge. And they don't, again, is it ignorance or arrogance or a mixture of both, that care homes will close. I mean, they say, Reeves has said, I need to raise this money through the employers' national insurance because I need the money to reduce NHS waiting lists. Again, it's more NHS first, social care second, even though social care is bigger than NHS, and if social care collapses, what happens to the NHS? But by that was her rationale. But by not excluding or giving some kind of help to social care, what she's doing is that care homes are going to close. Care homes will close because of these budget measures. And sadly, vulnerable elderly people will die because of these budget employers' national insurance measures. That is a fact, because care homes are vulnerable elderly people's homes. They are their homes. And if they, as vulnerable elderly, have to move to another care home or into hospital, I've seen it happen before. They will sadly, and a number of them will die. And of course, as care homes close, I mean, care homes don't, when say they close, it's not going out of business where you go into administration and somebody else comes along and carries on, and there's a bit of refinancing and carries on the business. When a care home closes, it closes.
Yeah.
And I know friends that are planning it, and they're planning to close and demolish the care home and do a different development on that site. So once the care home closes, it's gone for good. And that will lead to more bed blocking in NHS hospitals.
And will also add more strain to local councils, because one of the complaints of local councils for a long time has been that, national governments have basically refused to deal with this issue. They've kicked the can down the road. They've just said to local councils, you can increase council tax a little bit and then you can pay for all of it.
And the Conservatives were as guilty as, Boris Johnson stood outside Number 10 and said, I've got an oven-ready plan to fix social care. What a load of balls. I mean, that really, really annoyed me. But there we are. But care homes will close. Vulnerable elderly will die as a direct result of the budget.
And NHS beds will remain filled up with people that don't
There'll be
need
more
to be in the NHS.
There'll be more bed blocking because of that. There'll be more cancelled operations. And surprise, surprise, there will be longer NHS waiting lists. So they've, out of either, ignorance or whatever, they've shot themselves in both feet by the fact that by not protecting social care, then they are, and we can't, I have sympathy for my colleagues in retail and hospitality, but they can at least maybe put their prices up. And actually, one of the questions that somebody asked me recently was, yeah, but you're a private business. Well, yes, Renaissance Care is a private business, but 70% of our residents are local authority clients. So we are, yes, a private business, but we are providing in the main, 30% are private, 70% are local authority. We are in the main providing a public service. And actually another thing on the tax side is Edinburgh City Council, I got leaked documents last year on this, they made a budget decision. They were saying, we can only give you, for nursing care, we can only give you £950 a week per resident. But they own and run their own care homes. In Scotland, it's higher than in England. It's about 16% of care homes in Scotland are local authority run, and about 84% are either private sector or voluntary sector. And Edinburgh City Council, on the one hand, are saying to us, we can only afford to pay you £950 a week per resident. And they're approving, taxpayers' money, the figure was £1,819 per resident per week. They were paying themselves out of taxpayers' money for looking after the same people in their own care homes. And that is an absolute outrage. But apparently I've had Casey's opinion on this recently, and although it's a misuse of public taxpayers' funds, it's not illegal,
right?
And that there's not anything apparently that we can do about that other than highlight it. And I'm about to do something again on this year's budget where I think it's going to go to £2,000 per week per resident. And so, there's we have to keep fighting. I mean, people say to me, "Why bother?" No, I mean, it's just
Well, you've got to fight, and let's
You've got to fight.
Let's end this podcast on as much of a positive note as possible, with a message to government. Given your vast experience across many sectors, but currently, as we spent a lot of this episode talking about care, what would you say to government in terms of maybe just rowing back a little bit in order not to actually see this crisis come to fruition in the care sector?
Well, it shouldn't be about. It should be about people, not politics. And interestingly, it's just come to mind actually that the government are fully compensating the public sector run care homes for the employer's national insurance. You couldn't make it up. For the employer's national insurance increases. And yet we provide 70% of a public service and we're not getting a bean of help. So it shouldn't be, and I do think social care reform, I think apart from the fact that he's kicked it down the road too long, I don't see the need for it taking till 2028. And actually neither does the person they've put in charge to chair the commission. I understand she doesn't see why it should take till 2028. No. But as I said at the beginning, I didn't see them needing. I didn't expect Labour to come to have social care. I expected them to kick it down the road a bit and solve social care as an immediate priority. But I didn't expect them to give it the kicking that they have so quickly given it with the budget. And they're going to shoot themselves in the foot because the NHS is going to really struggle. And where is all this taxpayers' money that's going into the NHS going to go? I understand somebody, was it the one, Amanda Pritchard's just resigned?
Yeah, she's just resigned. Yeah.
What was it her that said, when asked a few weeks ago, where was that money going? She said, mainly on staff increases.
Yeah, I think that's what people in the NHS have said. Yeah. I don't know if it was her specifically, but they've said that all this additional cash is just going towards staff increases. It's not going towards more hip operations or expanding hospital capacity. It's just going straight to the back pocket.
The treatment of social care. I mean, the vulnerable elderly deserve better, and the frontline staff who were absolute heroes during the pandemic deserve better treatment from this government, and it's absolutely shocking and a real betrayal of the amazing staff that work in social care and the vulnerable elderly that we look after, and it's really shocking. But we will, try and end on a positive note, we will, I'm again, as a Scottish rugby fan, I'm a glass half full person rather than a glass half empty, and I don't give up easily, and I will battle on. Somebody asked me the other day, have I done any work on the inheritance tax issues, which we haven't really covered, but I actually said to them, I haven't given that more than a moment's thought. My main focus is to make sure that I have a business
to pass on in the first place.
Pass on in the first place.
Exactly right.
That's what gets me up every morning. I work 7 days a week. That's what gets me up every morning, is to make sure, despite all these slings and arrows that you're getting from the Labour government at the moment, is I'm still optimistic. I try and think, well, yes, it's a very tough and challenging market, but at the moment, but that might also lead to some interesting, trying to think on the positive side, some interesting opportunities and phone calls and things that might allow us to grow our business. But we're looking at more use of AI, cutting staff where we can, and how we fill this hole that's been created in what is already a very post-COVID, a lower margin sector in business than it was pre-COVID.
Robert, it's been a really interesting conversation. Thank you for your time. Can we tempt you back later this year to come in and possibly vent spleen on other areas?
Yeah, no. I'm happy to do that. I hope my fears of a tsunami of care home closures in the second half of 25 and first half of 26 prove unfounded, but based on those figures that you quoted earlier and the figures from Scotland, which are even higher, I do fear that, and if they try and act or react in several months' time, it'll be too late because, as I said, once a care home closes, that's it.
It's not coming
gone.
back. Well, the time for action is now. Well, we'll get you back in later this year, and we can perhaps reassess.
And thank
where we
you.
are.
Can I say thank you to the Taxpayers Alliance for all the amazing sort of pulling stuff out into the light that you do, particularly on the amazingly overpaid local council employees
Always
in
a pleasure.
Scotland.
Always a pleasure.
That's always a great. That's one of the things I just shaking my head at that. But no, thank you for all the amazing work that you do, and keep up doing that amazing work because it is appreciated. You've got to shine a light on these things because otherwise it'll just get worse and worse. There is a quote, but I can't remember it, where if for evil to prosper or something,
Just needs good people to stand by and not do anything.
nothing.
No, yeah. And so
Another quote is sunlight is the best disinfectant.
yeah. So keep doing what you're doing. You are making a difference, and we've just got to battle on because these guys do not have a clue. From a business point of view, this Labour government have no clue. And actually, I don't think they're even interested. I mentioned public sector good, private sector bad, full stop. That we're used to that, actually, in Scotland, because Alex Salmond, for all his many faults, was really good at engaging with business and entrepreneurs. Said, you guys have to do well for us to be able to do, we'll disagree over policy.
You have to do well so we can have the cash.
Yeah, he was very direct and supportive. So what can I do to help you guys? Whereas Nicola Sturgeon, Hamza Yousaf, and Kate Forbes is quite good and quite business friendly, which is slightly positive. But Nicola Sturgeon and Hamza Yousaf were very public sector good, private sector bad, full stop. So we, in Scottish business, we've been used to this kind of government, whereas maybe less so down here. So it doesn't come as necessarily a huge surprise. I think Labour were always going to, very clever people were fooled.
Yeah.
People way cleverer than me were fooled. Yeah. But I try and remain positive and would encourage people to support the Taxpayers Alliance for the excellent work they do.
Robert, thank you. Elliot, as always, thank you. And thank you for listening. This has been A Nation of Taxpayers, the weekly podcast from the Taxpayers Alliance. If you want to make contact, you can. We have an email address, which is podcast@taxpayersalliance.com. You find all of these episodes in various places, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on YouTube. And if you like what you hear, do us a favour and please help us spread the word. Thank you for listening.